head of the Adam Smith Business School, who will address some words. John, please.
I like that idea of some words. I'm not sure which word. No. First of all, a very, very warm welcome to Ambassador Dia and Ms. Sarmiento and to the Minister and to our fantastic panel. You're very, very welcome. A great warm welcome to the University of Glasgow and to from me as head of the Adam Smith Business School. The COP26 festival of ideas and of thought provocations and insights has really captured the interest of our students, of our colleagues. It's provided us all with fascinating opportunities to have debates and discussions, sometimes in areas where, you know, we possibly, if it weren't for COP26, would have had some interest, but COP26 and the possibility of engaging with such lively, interesting and informed other people has really brought the intellectual life of the university into focus, and also perhaps more of an activist life and a realization that as academics, you know, and as students, as distinguished alumni, we've got things to do as well as things to talk about and things to think about. So I think, you know, capturing the mood of some of the discussions at COP26, we know we've got things to do, whether immediately or in the next year or two as our students develop their careers. Adam Smith Business School is a triple accredited business school, recently in the world leading top 100 in the Times Higher Education Guide for Business and Economics. Significant presence in Financial Times rankings as well. So as a global leading business school, it's even more prominent and helpful for us to engage in these levels of debates. We're a research-led and professionally focused school. We specialize in economics, accounting, finance, and a range of management disciplines. We are absolutely proud to be of and for the University of Glasgow, and some of our most engaging work is actually jointly with other schools around the University of Glasgow. Finally, we are very, very proud of our heritage around Adam Smith. And again, COP26 gets us to think very, very deeply about sustainable growth, which we find in the Wealth of Nations, but also the theory of moral sentiments and our responsibilities to act ethically and with effective moral sentiment. So it's been a wonderful few days already, and we look forward to further discussions, including specifically this afternoon, this evening's, this morning's event. So I will leave the stage at this point, but thank you all very much.
Thank you, John. Well, during this event, a group of very distinguished panelists will answer questions. So we're not going to have presentations, but we will have a conversation. Through that dynamic, we aim to facilitate a conversation on current and future topics related to the energy transition the world, and Colombia in particular, is living. We would like to have a focus on the business side of the discussion, considering challenges and opportunities and how those may affect global value chains. We will use Colombia as a complex country, better known through the media, unfortunately, I would say, for violent events, social inequality, and drug cartels, rather than in terms of its biodiversity, key export products, or all its potentialities, especially investments in developing the country's infrastructures. For instance, one source indicates that Colombia holds nearly 10% of global biodiversity within its borders. Colombia boasts the second highest number of plant and amphibian species and produces 314 different types of ecosystems. These ecosystems are home to more than 1,800 species of birds, 456 mammal species, and 208 endangered amphibian species. It is also rich in fresh water, having the highest rate of precipitation. And maybe that is a surprise for Glaswegians. Estimated to be 3,240 millimeters per year. However, Today, Colombia's economy still relies heavily in exporting coal and oil. Though Colombia, is not considered among the oil countries. Let me thank the presence in the room of some very distinguished guests, as John already mentioned. The Colombian ambassador to the UK, Mr. Antonio Jose Ardila, and his wife, Ms. Luz Angela Sarmiento. Ms. Rachel Sanderson, Vice Principal for External Relations. Professor Penelope Morris, Deans for the Americas. Professor Gioia Falcone, Ranking Chair of Energy Engineering, and some other people that I know I'm missing. Above all, let me briefly introduce our panelists and moderators, and certainly allow me to express our deepest appreciation for your contributions to this discussion. We have a combination of panelists in the room and online. Therefore, I will alternate introducing them. First, Mr. Diego Mesa, Colombian Minister of Mines and Energy. He is leading the country's energy transformation by increasing the share of variable renewable from 1% to 12% of the power generation matrix. He spent 6 years at the International Monetary Fund. He gave assistance and advice to African, Asian, European, Latin American, and Middle Eastern countries. Prior to that, he worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers in Canada, and he holds an MA in economics from McGill. Second, online, Mr. Ricardo Sierra, CEO of CELSIA, a company generating, transmitting, and selling energy from renewable sources, water, wind, and sun, with thermal backup in Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, and Honduras. Mr. Sierra holds a BA in Business Administration from AFIT and a TRUM MBA degree from LSE, HEC Paris, and NYU. Third, Mr. Alan Hendry, here in the room, Director of Sustainability at Mott MacDonald, an engineering consultancy firm with global operations. The company indicates that its purpose is to improve society by considering social outcomes in all it does. Alan has worked in the area of sustainability since 1996, leading sustainability issues before for Worley and Jacobs Engineering. And he holds a BA honors degree in planning, city, urban, community, and regional planning from the University of Glasgow. Again, online, Ms. Johanna Trujilo, Managing Director of Mott MacDonald in Colombia, and the Solar Program Director. Johanna worked before for large utilities such Iberdrola, and recently has led some international renewable energy projects involving a wide range of technologies. She was trained as an electronic engineer and holds a master's in renewable energy systems technology from Loughborough University. Mr. Clemente del Valle, here in the room, the director of the Center for Financial Markets and Sustainable Infrastructure at the University of Los Andes in Colombia. Clemente is also part of the initiative on closing the investment gap in sustainable infrastructure in the Center for Global Sustainability at the University of Maryland School of Public Policy. Clemente is a global capital markets expert with more than 35 years of experience. He worked at the World Bank and held prominent positions in several Colombian ministries. He also has sat on various boards of public and private organizations. He holds a BA and MA in economics from the University of Los Andes and a master's degree in economics with an emphasis in monetary economics from LSE. And our moderators, Mr. Jose Puyana, head of ProColombia office in the UK, the Colombian Government Investment, Trade and Tourism Promotion Agency. Jose was the head of the International Affairs Office at the Colombian Ministry of Education and also worked for the United Nations Development Program. He holds a master's degree in public policy from University of Oxford. Professor Dr. Gordon Wilmsmeier is the Kühne Professorial Chair in Logistics at the University of Los Andes in Colombia, an associate professor for shipping and global logistics at the Kühne Logistics University in Hamburg, Germany. Gordon worked as Economic Affairs Officer in the Infrastructure Services Unit at the Economic Commission for Latin America. He holds a PhD in Geography from Osnabrück University and a master's degree in Geography, Information and Transportation Planning from Technische Universität Dresden. We are certainly delighted by the caliber of our panelists. And again, thank you to all you. Before we start our conversation, we would like to share with you a 2-minute video prepared by the President of Colombia, Mr. Iván Duque Márquez, as a greeting to start this event.
It is my honor to address this event organized by the Adam Smith Business School of Glasgow University. Let me share with you Colombia's efforts to accelerate our energy transition. It is our duty with the country, with the world, and with future generations. We have increased 15-fold our installed capacity of unconventional renewable energy projects over the course of the last 3 years. We have gone from 28 megawatts in 2018 to over 450, allowing us to supply more than 300,000 families. Our goal for this year is to reach 570 megawatts of unconventional renewable energy. We will do so by commissioning 16 projects, including the first wind farm in the country in over 17 years to be ready by December. We also sanctioned the energy transition law to continue positioning Colombia as an attractive destination for investment in non-conventional renewable energy. Our reactivation strategy, called Compromiso por Colombia, includes the commitment to clean and sustainable growth that encompasses 26 projects that are investments of over 12 trillion pesos that will benefit the whole country. Looking to the future, we launched the Hydrogen Roadmap for Colombia that sets ambitious goals by 2030, including mobilizing an investment ranging between $2.5 to $5.5 billion that will generate over 7,000 jobs. On the other hand, we held an auction that will multiply by 100 the installed capacity of unconventional renewable energies compared to what Colombia had in August 2018. This auction entails an investment of 3.3 trillion pesos and the creation of 4,700 direct jobs. Plus, it will allow us to reduce CO2 emissions by 465,000 tons per year. Our energy transition is transforming the present and the future of Colombia. Thank you very much for your support. Colombia wants to be the regional leader in energy transition.
Javier and everyone at the University of Glasgow for welcoming us to this event. My name is Johanna, and I'm the head of Pro-Colombia in the UK, and I'm going to be helping Javier to moderate this discussion. So very happy to be here, and let's jump into the discussion, because we've seen from the outset of this COP26 how important, of course, energy transition is for those countries that have shown ambition, that have shown interest in significantly reducing emission. Colombia has come to COP26 with a massive mandate of reducing 51% of emissions by 2030 and reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. And this has been presented in several spaces by President Duque during these first 3 days of COP26. And I'm delighted, of course, to be kickstarting this conversation, particularly with Minister Mesa, and to learn a bit more about those plans that President Duque just mentioned in terms of energy transition. Colombia has been attracting significant amounts of investment in the last decade or so, particularly in energy and infrastructure, because, of course, Colombia knows the importance of these two sectors for increasing levels of competitiveness. So probably to begin, Minister, why don't we go into the details of those very ambitious plans that the president has announced that you've been working on, and particularly give us a little bit of flavor of why Colombia has become such an interesting destination for investors in the energy segment. We saw what just happened with the auction and the amount of interest expressed. So why don't you start with a little bit of flavor on this point?
Sure, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here today and joined by this distinguished panelists as well. I'm going to get right to the point and elaborate a little bit more on what the president said and what we have done from the public policy point of view, which obviously the end goal is to allow the private sector to take the opportunity to invest in renewables in Colombia. So when we came into power back in 2018, we had a situation in Colombia that was a bit curious because Colombia had significant potential on variable renewable energy or non-conventional renewable energy, which is mostly wind and sun, because of our location. So when you look at the resource in Colombia, immediately you know it's world-class resource. The wind regimes, solar radiation is well above the world average. The price of technology was coming down over the last 2 decades. So the technologies were very competitive in other jurisdictions. And Colombia also had legislation that was approved in 2014 providing incentives, tax incentives to invest in these technologies. However, there was almost nothing going on the renewable space. There were only 2 projects, as the president said, it was just around 28 megawatts. That meant it was about 0.2% of the matrix. We have a wind farm in the northern part of the country and a solar farm operated by CELSIA, and we have his CEO here with us. But that was it. There was nothing else. We were taking advantage of our hydro resources, as Javier mentioned in the introduction, which we are also very rich. We have a big endowment. So we decided to look at the policy, and it was evident that we needed to improve and fine-tune the policy and the incentives that we had at the time. So that's exactly what we did since even before the start of the government. And once we approved the first comprehensive piece of legislation with the National Development Plan, we improved the benefits. And if we want to get into the details, I'll just give you one example. We had an uplift on the investment on variable renewable energy, 50% uplift, but it was limited to 5 years. That meant if you were to invest £100 in variable renewable energy, you were able to deduct 150, but only for 5 years. That meant that a new company, new project, it was not going to make taxable income in 5 years. So the benefit was not really available for them. So we just increased that to 15 years. And we did other changes similar to those ones that sound simple in practice, but from a practice point of view, it made a big difference. So we did that. We complemented with other changes in our Finance Act in 2019. And finally, as President said, we approved energy transition law. And I think now we have one of the most attractive fiscal regimes for investment in variable renewable energy and energy efficiency. We complemented that with auctions. So we also did a lot of innovation policy on an auction side. We did the first one in 2019, two in 2019, and we just did another one this year. So with the auctions only, we've been able to go from 28 megawatts to 2,800 megawatts in the span of 3 years. So it's multiplying by 100 times. And now there's a significant pipeline of new projects that will come online in 2022, 23, 24. And I think we'll probably reach 20% of the matrix by 2024, 2025. So, and I think, just to conclude on that point, our view is always, how we can use public policy to allow investment from the private sector into this space. And obviously, this is very well connected with our carbon neutrality strategy, with the 51% reduction in CO2 emissions. There's a national plan, there is sectorial plans, and diversification of the energy matrix in general, not only electricity, obviously is one of the key components to achieve that goal. So that's kind of like a very quick summary on energy transition. But obviously, this also includes sustainable mobility, mitigation strategies, carbon markets, and we can going on.
Thank you, Minister. I think that does give us a broad idea of where we came from, where we are at the moment, and what, of course, is attracting the interest of investors. And as you say, the legal framework is certainly one of the aspects. But as you said in one of the meetings that we've had during these days, Colombia has the resources, you just mentioned it. Colombia has the incentives, you mentioned it as well, and Colombia has the off-takers as well, that, of course, provide an additional layer of interest for investors. But a solid energy transition does need as well innovation, technology, of course, investment, as we've mentioned, to reach that sort of diversified matrix that, of course, countries need in this transition. So could you elaborate a little bit more about, well, the President did mention the route in terms of green hydrogen, but what is the ministry, what are you looking at the moment in terms of new technologies, new options? We've heard a lot about offshore wind, which is, of course, massive here in the UK. We've heard a lot during these days about green hydrogen, where Colombia is, of course, very well positioned as well. So could you tell us a little bit more where we are, how you're looking into these different technologies, and what else can be done in that sense to attract investors to whatever's happening?
Sure. So with all this, changes that took place over the last 3 years, we had to think about, what's next. And as you said, technology changes very quickly, and the world is demanding bigger commitments. So we've concentrated over the last maybe 12 months on new sources of renewable energy. So first thing that we did was we launched the hydrogen roadmap for Colombia. As you say, green hydrogen, Colombia has everything that's needed to produce green hydrogen. We have the 6 largest renewable hydro resources in the world. You were mentioning, our precipitation rate in Colombia. The wind speed, I already mentioned, solar radiation, I already mentioned. So the 3 ingredients to produce green hydrogen are in Colombia, and we have the infrastructure in place. So we needed to, create a roadmap with identifying regulation that needs to be implemented. We've included in the energy transition law fiscal incentives for blue and green hydrogen as well. So that's going to be an area that we're going to be doing a lot of work. We already have specific targets for 2030. We have expression of interest from many companies, including foreign companies, that will be developing pilots over the next 6 months. So I think before we leave government, we'll have at least 4 pilots in green hydrogen. Blue hydrogen, which we think is part of the transition. You mentioned coal and hydrocarbons, which are a key part of our macroeconomic stability. I think part of the transition is finding other uses for coal. If we can mitigate or eliminate the emissions that are produced with coal, if we are burning the coal in Colombia, because about 80% of our coal is exported, so it's not impacting our goals. We're also leaving all the regulation for offshore wind. There's also enormous potential in the northern part of the country, and we expect to finalize draft regulation by the end of the year and then get comments from agents and stakeholders. And another piece that is key for the future is large-scale storage. So we were pioneers as well. We launched the first auction for large-scale storage with batteries in Latin America 2 months ago. Very successful. It was awarded to a Canadian company, and we expect to continue to use auctions as well for large-scale storage. And finally, we're also doing a lot of work in geothermal. We already have 1 pilot. We have an oil and gas company producing electricity with geothermal resources in one of their oil fields, and we have 2 more pilots coming along. So that's what the future looks like: hydrogen, offshore wind, geothermal, and large-scale storage.
Jose, let me jump here, Minister. And you already mentioned that coal and oil certainly plays a key role in the macroeconomic stability of the country. In 2019, it seems that over 53% of the exports of the country were on coal and oil. The other angle, in addition to that issue, that investors could look at as a risk is all the elements related with previous consultations, the time that is required to get environmental license and all that. So what are the plans? What is the government doing really to reduce the risk perception that investors may have? And what is the government doing, thinking ahead, how the country has to change in its macroeconomics so it's not relying so much in oil and carbon?
So I'm going to divide the answer into two. So I'll address the macroeconomic issues on oil and gas and coal first. First, I think we need to go back to the very definition of the word. So we're talking about energy transition, and this is going to take time. And for Colombia, we are a net exporter of energy in general. So we export most of the coal that we produce. We export more than 50% of the hydrocarbons that we produce in the form of crude oil. And we think that as a developing country with still a lot of social gaps that need to be closed, we have to continue to monetize those resources, especially because the demand is coming from abroad, from Europe, from the US, from Asia. And so we'll do the transition, but we'll make sure that we also put people first. So I've said this in many different venues, we need to have not only a just and well-managed transition, but a people-centered transition. So I have some provinces in Colombia that their GDP depends between 35 to 45%, for example, on coal. So I need to think about what are we going to do with those families. It's a good coincidence that those provinces are also the ones with the highest potential for wind and solar, and it's exactly where those projects are being developed. So we're working with our education ministry to make sure that we also have formation and we can provide capacity building to those communities so that they can also do the transition. I'm not too worried about changing our dependence very quickly. It has to take place, but I think we have time to be able to transition. And it's going to be a matter for the largest consumers of energy, which is not Colombia. And here is a good figure to keep this into context. Colombia only is responsible for 0.6% of CO2 emissions worldwide. So it's just a tiny fraction, but regardless of that, we are fully committed to reduce those emissions by 51% to 2030 and to be carbon neutral by 2050. And we have clear commitments. The sector, for example, is only responsible for about 32 to 33 million tons of CO2 emissions. We're reducing 11.2 million tons by 2030. We have already the electricity sector with a pledge. The mining sector is working on one, and oil and gas is actually being announced almost as we speak in Glasgow. And we're gonna get to zero by 2050. So I'll move on to the next question, which I think is very relevant, and I'm sure probably Ricardo will have something to say about it as well. Prior consultation, it's mandated by law. This, for those that are not familiar with Colombia, is something that you have to consult ethnic communities if you're going to have infrastructure projects in their land, and that has to be done. There's no way around it. Yes, it is a long process. It is much easier with some communities than with other communities, but we have to all work together and make sure that they are part also of the energy transition. What we're working on is to make sure that the environmental licensing process, which I think works fine now after some changes that we've made in this administration, can go in parallel with the prior consultation, because the problem that we have is that the process now is sequential. So unless you're completely finished with the prior consultation, the environmental authority can start to review an application for an environmental license. So we can work on, maybe having a parallel process, and that will help speed up this permit.
Well, I'm tempted to ask more questions, but I know that
I'm happy to answer.
I think we're aware you have a very, very strict agenda, and you have to go back quite soon to the venue at COP26. But before you leave, I would just probably ask a couple of minutes. Given the interest that we've seen right now at COP and the amount of pledges in terms of funding, both from the private and the public sector, from governments and firms, what would you say to these firms that are looking into opportunities to invest in different sorts of options in terms of green finance and in terms of alternatives in this objective of reducing emissions. Why should they look into Colombia as their next destination?
So I think there are significant opportunities in Colombia for climate finance, and climate finance, I think, is the key to bridge between the commitment and what we actually have to deliver in terms of actions. So not only we have all this potential on clean energy, as the Javier said in the introduction, we are one of the most biodiverse countries on Earth. I think we need to come up very quickly with very standardized carbon credit market, so we can also help mitigate emissions in other countries. I think also we need to come up with payments for environmental services so we can protect our biodiversity. The president announced yesterday we're joining the 30 by 30 alliance, which means we'll have 30% of our land protected by 2030. I think he already announced that he's bringing that forward maybe to 2022. So there are significant opportunities from a finance and investment point of view, not only in energy, but in all these other environmental related issues. And I'll just, because I know Javier is very interested in this topic, I'm going to say something that may be a little bit provoking, which I said in another panel on Monday or Tuesday. And I think we need to agree on something, and is I don't think the problem is the source of energy. Emissions are the problem. So everyone, obviously it's working on getting rid of coal, because coal at the moment is the dirtiest fuel. But if there's a technology out there that we can find to eliminate or mitigate significantly the emissions from burning coal, then we should be fine using coal, and we shouldn't be afraid of saying so. So I think, don't focus too much on the energy source, but let's focus on emissions. And I think that's what we need to attack. But some people, are afraid of saying those things. We are the 7th largest exporter of thermal coal. So I think we should be also devoting some investment in technology, science, and innovation, finding ways to be able to mitigate that. And that's why also why we include in our energy transition law incentives for carbon capture and storage.
Well, Minister, thank you very much. And we know you have to.
I think I have 10 more minutes.
Oh, you do have 10 more minutes.
My staff is not going to like this, but I'm enjoying this conversation.
So Javier, over to you.
Thank you, Jose. And certainly, I just want to make a comment so we can continue the conversation with the other panelists, because it seems that sometimes in conferences like this, COP26, we try, or we tend to have, okay, this is a solution, and this solution must fit everyone. And there's no way. Each country, each city is different and requires different approaches. And certainly there is a challenge that you have given to us, universities, not just in Colombia, but also here, that we should work and think out of the box in different venues. Like, okay, let's keep using coal. Wow, that's heretic, or crude oil. But let's be wise and try something different. Gordon, would you please start in that valuable interaction with Ricardo?
Javier, thank you very much. Well, Ricardo, I mean, we heard from the introduction from Javier that you are focusing on renewable energy and using different sources that we have available in Colombia: water, sun, wind, thermal backups. Now, I would like to ask you a threefold question, also considering that the country actually has a very ambitious goal for electromobility across all modes of transport, which will actually lead to a significant increase for electricity. So the question, though, the threefold question I would like to ask is, when do you think Colombia will reach 100% of renewable energy within its energy matrix? And this is important from I think from the perspective of private business. And how do you think this is achievable? What is missing for that to reach this goal? And what do you anticipate this mix to be? Will we really focus more on sun or photovoltaics? Will we have different mixes? Maybe also give a view how important that will be for the generation of hydrogen. I think we will follow up on this with Javier later on. And then the question is, if we base the whole matrix on renewable energy, how are we going to deal with fluctuations that we would probably have within these sources? So maybe a difficult question, maybe not, maybe you have the answer. So I'm looking forward to hearing your answer.
Thank you so much, Professor Gordon, for this easy and very easy to answer question. It's great to start. It's a great start for me. And first of all, thank you, Javier. Thank you to University of Glasgow for this opportunity. And it's so good to see my friends and my minister, who is doing a great job in this energy transition in this panel. So we are really happy to see how the dreams that the President Duque has at the beginning of his administration being completely achieved. So it's great to see that. It's great to see that. So let me start with the energy matrix in Colombia. Maybe you all remember that Colombia has, I think, the 6th cleanest energy matrix in the world. So we have, when we talk about energy transition in Colombia, I don't know if that sentence really applies to Colombia, because we have 70% of our energy is coming from hydro. And basically what we use coal and gas power plants is for backup, for resiliency, for giving the clients 24/7 energy. So that's one thing. But we are really suffering from this climate change, the climate volatility that we are suffering. And in Colombia, we have extreme rainy seasons and extreme dry seasons with the Niño and Niña phenomenon. So we need to increase the presence of solar and wind, which we have plenty, as the ministers mentioned. So I think to achieve 100% renewable is a dream. We all want to have it, but I think it's really, really very hard. Countries that have that idea and they discharged very soon the fossil fuel plants have suffered when things don't go as planned. So I think we need to be very careful to go into that. But I think there are a lot of opportunities in Colombia because the per capita use of energy in Colombia is so low that we need to increase the use of electricity in the transport sector, in the homes. And also we have the opportunity to use our sun and wind to produce green hydrogen, as you, Professor, mentioned, which is, I think, a very great opportunity for Colombia to use hydrogen in our industries, in our cement plants, for example. That could be a very interesting proposition. So I think Colombia has a great opportunity in the renewable space, and also something that maybe haven't been mentioned by the minister is we are under a solar revolution in Colombia. When you see construction companies, they are in every building, in every house that they are building, they are considering to use solar. And I think that is going to create a huge disruption in the usage of energy in Colombia. So I foresee a very interesting road ahead for cleaning the little bit of coal and gas that we are using in the energy matrix. Well,
Excuse myself.
Yes. Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And,
And I apologize. Prior commitment.
No.
Not prior consultation, but prior commitment.
We will tell you a lot of things that we're gonna talk about you when you go.
But Ricardo made very good points. So there's plenty to discuss about. But thank you very much.
I was thinking that if we had teletransportation, it will be easier, but certainly with all the roads closed, it makes harder to move from one place to another here in Glasgow in these days. Ricardo, you just mentioned two things, but before I go to those two things that you mentioned, congratulations for those 125 gigawatts that you won last week in that auction. That's great for CELSIA and certainly for the country in the production of renewables in sun. So congratulations. But one of your sister companies is Argos, a cement company.
Yeah.
Well, it's the group is the mother, but the and this morning actually I was attending another event here, the Professor Falcone organized, and certainly it was mentioned again how the cement industry is responsible for CO2 emissions, and it's terrible. It's like talking about the devil. And now you have this sister and Cementos Argos and Argos Group, well, established CELSIA years ago. And some people might think, well, this is just greenwashing marketing or whatever with CELSIA, but you are doing a lot. So I would like you to comment, what are you doing together with Argos? If you are doing something, what are you thinking ahead? And what are really the challenges that you see in Colombia to keep exporting energy? Because the minister just mentioned that we're a net exporting of energy in terms of we're exporting crude oil and coal. But if countries stop buying those, what are we going to do? What are the challenges? How can we do it?
Thank you again for an easy question, Javier. And
I love you.
Yeah. No, let me begin with this. For example, in CELSIA, we have thermal plants, and we are actually building one. We're building one gas power plant in Colombia, 200 megawatts, which will allow us to sell energy 24/7, which is something that if we rely completely in solar and wind, we won't be able to do it. So what are we doing to do it? Because as Minister mentioned, the problem is the emissions. So we are going to plant a 1,000-hectare native forest in order to balance the potential emission that we are going to have in the plant. So it's something, a nature-based solution for emissions. So that's something that we are doing in our company. Our company is almost, next year is going to be negative in terms of its emissions. So that's CELSIA. We have a sister company, which is a cement, Argos, which is, maybe most of you know that company is working in many different fronts to reduce its emissions. They know that they have to do it, and it's an imperative. So Grupo Argos has different metrics and different goals for the different companies. But let me tell you a couple of those that Cementos Argos is building on. They just produce a green cement with a lot of reduction in terms of the uses of clinker, which is when you produce the clinker is when you produce the CO2. So they are using different materials for the production of this green cement, and it's not greenwashing. The reduction in emissions is dramatic. So there are ways to do it. And I remember that we invested like, I don't know, 10 years ago in different cement types of production, which allows to have cementitious materials to replace cement in the future. So Cementos Argos is working on that as well. And also in terms of the usage of the CO2, they have a pilot plant producing algae with different materials using the CO2 that is coming from the plant in Cartagena. And I think they are going to do a pilot plant in the USA very soon with that technology that has been developed internally. So I think we are all together in this race. We need to tackle this together. And the cement business has a real challenge in his hands. But let me tell you, in Grupo Argos, we are working really hard to solve it. And I hope we will.
Thank you, Ricardo.
Well, Ricardo, thank you very much for that. I think it was quite illustrative of what the sector is doing and the group in particular is doing. I would like to bring now Mott MacDonald into the conversation. Mott MacDonald is is a consulting firm, of course, as many of you know, British firm based here that has been looking into Colombia for many years. Actually, we were just talking outside that Mott MacDonald was even involved in the first plans of the Medellin Metro back in the 80s. And Mott decided to open up an office in Colombia back in 2017. And since then, they've been growing steadily. So it's one of the successful, let's say, British investments in Colombia in the last sort of decade. So I'd like to ask Johanna, who's also joining us virtually, about how Mott is looking at the country. So Mott MacDonald started in Colombia, quite actively participating in sort of the infrastructure progress that has been done in the last decade in Colombia, involving quite actively in PPPs, in road infrastructure, in schools, in hospitals. And now you're looking very actively, of course, into renewable energies as well, or in energy in general. So Johanna, could you give us a little bit of flavor of how of the vision that you currently have of Colombia, of the sort of progress that the country has, and the reasons why Mott MacDonald has committed to growing its operation in Colombia in the years to come. Thank you, Johanna.
Okay, thank you very much, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. It is a pleasure to be here and being part of all of these changes and aspirations that we all have, and particularly also young people. It's quite interesting to see how everyone is involved, no? Well, Mott MacDonald, as you have rightly said, is a British company, and we came to Colombia back in, well, we have been here since the 80s and starting with particularly infrastructure projects, as you mentioned. And we saw the need to set an office because we were working in different projects, including some airports. And back on that, setting up the office from transportation, the energy group from Mott MacDonald, we were working in several projects across Latin America, and we saw the potential of Colombia as being our base for renewable energy projects, basically traveling from the UK to Latin America, from Mexico down to Chile, covering the Caribbean too. So we saw Colombia as a potential for covering the whole renewable market in Latin America. And we saw the potential in Colombia because there are very good professionals there. So we started looking into people with experience or with knowledge, with working English. So we saw that Colombia will give us these opportunities as a company to set our business. And that's the reason why we went to Colombia. We have been very successfully working in Colombia since 2017. We have a large group, and we have decided to focus mainly in energy, and particularly in renewable energy. So we work in wind projects onshore and offshore. Obviously, there are no that many offshore projects yet in Latin America, but we have all the experience from Europe and particularly the UK. And of course, the onshore projects across the region. And obviously, we are here to also provide our know-how and our experience globally to the country. And solar projects, where we also work, I mean, we work for PV, solar photovoltaic project, but we also work on CSP projects. We are currently working on the Cerro Dominador CSP plant in Chile that has been successfully commissioned. And it's a very, I mean, it's a continuing project globally. And it's our pleasure to be part of all of these initiatives. We have a team, we work closely with in the UK for green hydrogen. And we see that Colombia has also the potential, as the minister was saying, and the president, for other sources of renewable, like geothermal and hydrogen. So we are here to help, obviously, to make business and to support our clients that are global, and they are working in Latin America, but we are also here to support the country, to be part of the growth. I mean, we are really pleased with the potential of professionals in Colombia. It has been really a pleasure to work with them, and they are working not just in Colombia, Colombia or Latin America, but they are working on projects globally because that's the way what MacDonald work. So yeah, that's only a positive view from our side, and the plan is continue to grow and continue to go to this path on the renewable and environmental and social part, because we also have a team that support all the projects in the region.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
Harry, just a very quick note. So you see Colombia sort of as your hub for the region. So you're operating from Colombia to service the wider region in Latin America. Has that idea of looking at Colombia as a hub worked for you?
Yeah, perfectly. I mean, we are. We didn't just come to Colombia because of Colombia. To serve Colombia, but we came to serve the region, and that's what we are doing. We're serving Colombia, obviously because we are here, but we are working in the whole region, and we see it strategically location. I mean, it's right in the middle between the Central America, South America, and close to the Caribbean. We see it because, as I said, the potential for employees, basically, I mean, people well educated, and it has been very, productive. We expect to continue to grow. We are always having openings for jobs and looking for people to join us, all sorts of people, and just to serve the region, basically, the whole Latin America.
Thank you, Johanna. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Johanna. And it's good to have you here in Colombia, basically have you next door. Maybe I would like to ask Ellen now. So we understand that Mott MacDonald is fully committed to walk the talk about being carbon neutral. And you're currently involved in the decarbonization of UK ports as well. Now, here in Colombia, the University de los Andes, together with the Transport Ministry and actually with the terminals across the country, we're currently engaged in a significant effort to create a baseline of energy consumption and emissions in the port sector, because we know that the ports are an essential part of the value chains when we think about export and import from the country. Now, taking your experience you're having in the UK, how do you think those best practices experience could support us in also discussing the transition of energy consumption, of energy efficiency in the terminals, in ports, possibly in logistics centers that we have in Colombia, and with this contribute to the mitigation agenda?
Sorry, would you please pass?
Yeah, this is a very interesting area because we're undertaking a piece of work at the moment for the Institute of Civil Engineers to answer the exam question of how we accelerate the transition to net zero. And as a result of that, we've been speaking to various stakeholders, and one of those is British ports. And we're seeing that they have raised this issue that as we move to electrification, there are some challenges there. There's going to be need for more bunkering, but I think a lot of the technology around hydrogen is one thing they can do. Yesterday, I was also at a session with Scottish Government looking at the decarbonisation of industrial sites generally, and I guess to a certain extent, a port is an industrial site. And there was a really interesting example from DNV in Norway, where they were looking at various alternative fuels for ships. So for certain routes, you can use battery electric. For other ones, you can use hydrogen. So I think we're seeing a rapid change in the use of fuels as well for shipping. I think one of the challenges we have is also addressing demand management. There's been a lot of talk about generation of energy, but I think we need to be careful about how we use it. And I think there needs to be the balance between energy efficiency, but also promotion of renewable technologies. But it's the technology, as we've all observed, is changing all the time. And there's also the other issue about the use of shipping. Can shipping be used more as a lower carbon opportunity to ship materials? It doesn't all need to go by road. But I think there's also a challenge in taking a systems approach to the whole transportation and freight system. It's still seen as, road, rail, water, air. There needs to be more thought as to how that works more as a system going forward, I would say.
Thank you, Alan. Well, time flies. And now I would like to ask an easy question to Clemente. We have heard for 45 minutes some of the plans of the Colombian government. We got the view from a Colombian company, CELSIA, and we got a little flavor of what Mott MacDonald is doing and why Mott MacDonald decided to establish this operation and office in Colombia. And certainly, I keep thinking all this sustainability discourse and agenda sounds great, but it has to be sustainable in the whole sense of the word. So financially sustainable. You have been working in the different market and financial instruments. What do you think will foster, what kind of instruments could foster the transition and make this transition sustainable? And now that you are also closer to the academia, what do you think could be or should be the role of universities in this process in the years to come?
Okay, Javier, thanks for, again, the easy questions that you like. Look, let me start with the last, and then I'll go back to the first. I feel that universities should play a much bigger role than they're playing. I have to say that that's not necessarily, and we were having lunch talking that even this university could do much more in helping on this transition. The same with our universities. But in Los Andes, we took a decision that there was a key role, at least in 4 dimensions. One was to act as an honest broker. And let me give you an example of that one. Honest broker is like hearing the plan of the minister. I think it's very important what the ministry are trying to do in trying to prepare a smooth transition, energy transition. However, we all know that this is not going to depend on Colombia. This is going to depend on what the developed countries demand. It was going to depend what India and China are going to do with coal, for example. So being able to study and make analysis of possible pathways, for example, of energy transitions is something universities can do, and act as an honest broker and tell the government, look, I think what you're doing is good, but you may be overestimating that you can sell, for example, neutral coal in the dimensions that you want to do. So we are doing a study. I mean, probably the first study for Latin America on transition risk. We are doing it with WTW, a large broker from the UK. Is the first study done in Latin America to analyze possible scenarios, different scenarios, especially looking at scenarios that are originated outside, where Colombia just takes that as an externality. So Colombia has to be prepared, not only to the scenario that the government is planning, which I think they have to do it, is the normal to government, but they also have to get prepared for scenarios that will be out of what they thought was going to happen, and helping them think on what could be alternative strategies or even anticipate decisions related to the substitution of energy. So promoting other energies will be important. That's something, for example, we're doing through an applied research to help the stakeholders, starting with government, to consider the possibilities. And that's what we're doing with the French supporting us, and then with the UK government, we're actually building capacity, which is the second area where I think universities can play a key role, is building capacity among the private sector and also in governments. I mean, there's a lot of capacity building that needs to be done in all these topics. And there's a lot of new areas. There's a lot of opportunities. And let me give you an example. We are concluding a first study on opportunities related to sustainable investments. The Davos promoted a study that was developed by a UK firm called Systemic, and they did a study in 2018 about that they call Better Business, Better World, and they identified 60 important businesses that could be developed related to the ODS, achieving the ODS, the SDGs, ODS in Spanish, and they identified that those opportunities could generate an impact close to 12 trillion in 2030. We did the same study for Colombia, we identified that we could generate an impact close to $95 billion, out of which 1/3 of it will come from energy-related businesses, whether it's expanding the renewables, whether it's in energy efficiency, whether it's in electric mobility. And now we're trying to get deeper to see what are the obstacles, what are the business models that will probably work better. And that's, again, something that universities can do. I mean, through research and through bringing together the parties, you can do a lot. And one last example of what we can do is in innovation. You were asking me about innovation and finance. And that's, again, what the center is focusing. This is the areas of this center that I'm leading. And we have a project, and you make the question to Ricardo. One of the projects that we're working on is how can we scale up an initiative from a waste management company who wants to convert waste into an energy component that could substitute coal in the cement industry. So you could do a double dipping, you call it, no? I mean, you improve waste management, and on the other hand, you improve also the emissions coming from the cement production. And this needs scaling up, and this needs financing. And again, that's an area where the center is also focusing, is how can we help the industry to make better use of innovation on the finance side? One example is obviously all of these thematic capital markets instruments like green bonds, social bonds, energy transition bonds. There's a lot of work now. Investors want to have a sense that what they're doing will have an impact, and they want to have instruments that are relatively targeted to those objectives. So, and we are not using it enough. Colombia is just starting. There are few issuers, but there's a lot of potential there. So we as universities, we sign an agreement with IFC and IGMA from here to do, we're now training companies and banks in Latin America. We did it already in South America, Central America, and we just finished one in Brazil. And this has been done out of the center in Bogota, but working regionally, again, about helping people understand how they can use these instruments. So I hope this gives you a sense that universities can play a very important role in helping and speeding up, but also playing what you're trying to do here, which is an honest broker role. I mean, challenging. I mean, you have to challenge governments, because if not, sometimes they convince themselves of something, but sometimes you need to be challenged, because it's the only way to get better prepared. And we are confronting a very complex risk related to climate change. So we need to do that very honest role.
Okay.
Javier, can
Jose,
I
please.
jump in briefly?
Yes.
I don't know if everyone's aware, but Clemente played a very significant role in Colombia in structuring the whole PPP mechanism that we had, and that we have as a country, that has been fundamental in developing all the 4G and 5G infrastructure projects. So, we were just talking several years ago. We spent a day or two in London just convincing investors why to look at Colombia and what Colombia was doing in infrastructure. So I'm tempted really not to ask something to Clemente about this, and particularly about what's being discussed in Glasgow, and how, again, looking at your years at the FDN, how can we convince, a little bit of what I asked the minister, all of the firms that are now pledging here in Glasgow to invest significantly in energy, not just in energy, but in emission reduction. What sort of arguments, what sort of mechanism, what sort of instruments can we actually present to all of these investors that are present as we speak in the city, thousands, that if they want to commit to literally to tackling climate change, why Colombia should be their next place to invest?
Oh, thanks for the question, and I think this is interesting. I recently participated in a study that was produced by the World Economic Forum, and we produced a note about non-financial catalyzers for sustainable investment. And we use Colombia's 4G program as an example, in that study, and you should look at it. I mean, it's a nice note, but it was exactly showing that what Colombia has done and it should be done, and it's been doing also in energy. But we did it in roads, we did it in infrastructure, which was, I mean, you have to create conditions, and part of the conditions are the macro part, which I think Colombia has been a very, very, very prudent country and has created good macro conditions from a fiscal and from a monetary policy, and macro conditions are there. Then you have to have sectorial transformations. You have right policies, right regulations, and then you have to build capacity in the institutions that are involved in those sectors. Is that kind of transformations that makes opportunities attractive to international investors when they see a country that it has invested on the macro side, on the sectorial side, on the regulation and the capacity building. I mean, we still have a lot to do, but I have to say Colombia gave a good example. And I think we have to do the same in other sectors. I think in the energy sector, Colombia has also been a leader on creating conditions and creating the capacity building. We have very good institutions. And I feel that that's a sector where Colombia also has an important advantage. And then let me add a little component of what we are doing now in the university and what the center is doing in this particular, in completing the cycle. We think it's important also to people to measure the positive externalities of the transformations that you're doing. Because sometimes stakeholders, investors, shareholders are always looking for the IRR, only the IRR, but they underestimate the huge IRR that is coming from the sustainability investment they're doing. So we're convinced that we need to start changing the way shareholders and stakeholders related to really start incorporating, and when they look at the return of a project, that they also are able to monetize the externalities in some way that are generated by these kind of projects. So they start seeing, you know, I mean, this project is generating 20% sustainable return, including the economic and the sustainable component. And that has to become a trend. So people will start valuing much more, not only the economic return, but also, in addition, all the externalities that are generated. I think we need to do that in Colombia. It needs to be done everywhere. But if we have that combined with all the framework that we have put together in sectors like the energy, I think Colombia has a great potential to do and to be a leader in the region in this area.
Gordon, do you have any follow-up question to finish, or are you okay? Or any of the panelists, if anyone, Alan, please.
It's not really a question, just a couple of observations, because I think these are great opportunities for people to learn from one another. And I think the opportunity for the UK and Colombia to learn from one another is fantastic. And I'm interested in the fact that you've got a very strong hydro industry. We have that certainly in Scotland, but maybe less sun. But just it was on sort of technology and innovation. So in Scotland, we have EMEC, which is the European Marine Energy Centre, which is the place where the world comes to test out their technologies. I think having that kind of facility is a good thing to do. And also just the Minister touched on the fact of having a just transition, and Scottish Government has just produced a report about a just transition for energy in Scotland. So I think there's opportunities for countries to learn from one another, and it'd be good to follow up with that in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Absolutely. Gordon.
Well, Javier, maybe just follow up on Ellen's comment here. And I think we have been starting on several of these collaborations, as Clemente mentioned, with the Center of Financial Sustainable Finances at the university. We're actually having a couple of projects at the university with the UK Pact Colombia program. So these efforts are a good starting point to continue. And I think with the ambitions we've heard here from either side, there's a lot of work to do, but there's a lot to gain. And also, I know that in Scotland, there is a lot of waterborne transport. And Len mentioned that. And so there's a lot to learn also for Colombia, for inland shipping and things like that. So I think the opportunity is big. The question maybe to bring forward then is how can we make this happen? how can we bring us together? And I really would like to refer to Clemente's comment here on the issue, like, okay, what can be the role of universities, of us, to bring this collaboration? Because we've really found that the collaboration between public, private sector and the academia, what we have done in Colombia has been very fructiferous over the last years, and there have been very good results and tangible results. So I think there's a good opportunity here to strengthen that and go forward with that.
Thank you, Gordon. Yes. Certainly, there are a lot of opportunities. Ricardo.
Yes, just a couple of comments regarding Jose's question about the importance of a framework. In Colombia, when we started our dream, our solar dream, we started with a pilot plant of 10 megawatts. And our big ambition was 250 megawatts. And when we were in the process, Jose, we found that the interest from foreign investors, and we found a very good partner. We partnered with Cubicle Sustainable Investments, which actually represents 2 Canadian pension funds. And we have a company which now is developing 1 gigawatt of solar projects in Colombia. So that will demonstrate that we have a very interesting framework for investors to come to play in the energy sector in Colombia. And something that I want to mention in terms of ESG, as Clemente mentioned, is 2 things. Women in the workforce in energy. The latest solar farms that have been built in Colombia, 1 ours and 1 from Ecopetrol, 25 and 35% of the workforce, the people involved in the construction, were women. That's something that you don't see in any other project in Colombia. So that's creating a lot of interesting opportunities. And when you see the solar roofs that have been built, is not for the rich people in Colombia. Most of our clients are building low-income housing with solar roofs, LED lining, and efficient households, appliances. So it creates a lot of, this transition is creating a lot of opportunity and a lot of different things that will balance the equation that we need all to balance. So thank you again, Javier and everything and the university for this great opportunity.
This is certainly the opportunity to thank you, everyone, especially the panelists. It has been great. Thank you for your generosity in time and openness to share what you have been doing. It has been great. And that was mainly our purpose, to start this conversation. And maybe we have to start thinking in the conversations that we will have to have very soon about things that we are not considering yet. The whole issue of water, the whole issue of biodiversity. We are now very much concerned with energy, and that's key, but we have to start those conversations because those are the conversations that certainly will take us into our future. So on behalf of the MBA program, the Adam Smith Business School, the University of Glasgow, thank you to the audience and thank you to all of you. And we will keep in touch. So this conversation will continue. Thank you to all. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Javier.
You are invited certainly to mingle around and have other conversations with those who are.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.